Cassandra Ainsworth caught the stranger's sleeve in the dark of the U-Walk and said the most ruinous sentence of her life before she had quite finished deciding to say it. "Please, I need you to pretend to be my husband. For 1 hour, that is all, and afterward you may forget you ever set eyes on me." He went still under her hand, not the stillness of a startled man, she would think later, but the stillness of a man weighing a coin he had not expected to find in the road. "A duke," she rushed on, because his silence was unbearable, and the music from the house had already changed to the opening figure of a quadrille. "You must be a duke." "My duke. I know how that sounds. I know precisely how it sounds, and I have no time to make it sound better." The warm dark smelled of cut grass and crushed jasmine, and beneath it, the beeswax sweetness drifting from 100 open windows. Candlelight lay across the gravel in long gold bars. Somewhere above them on the terrace a woman laughed, high and careless, and Cassandra's heart struck her ribs as though it meant to break out and run without her. The stranger turned his head. She could make out very little of him, a strong line of jaw, the pale blur of a plain neckcloth tied without art, shoulders broad enough to fill the gap between the U's. No coat of consequence. No rings she could feel through his sleeve. A guest of no importance, then, or some gentleman's secretary sent out to take the air. Precisely what she needed. A nobody she could borrow and return unmarked. "You're trembling," he said. His voice was low and unhurried, with a gravel in it, like a stone turned over in a stream. Not a servant's voice. Not quite a gentleman's either, or rather, a gentleman who had stopped troubling to perform one. "I am aware that I am trembling." She tightened her grip. "It does not alter the request. You've the wrong man. I have the only man. There is no one else in this garden, and in 11 minutes there will be no garden left to me at all." She heard the crack in her own voice, and despised it. "Sir, I am not in the habit of seizing strangers in the dark. I have never done anything like this, but there is a man in that house who means to ruin my sister by morning. And the one thing standing between him and her is a lie I told in a moment of desperation. And the lie has a shape, and the shape is a husband, and the husband is a duke, and he does not exist." She drew a breath that scraped. "Unless you will be him." For 1 hour, a moth blundered between their faces, drawn to the gold light at her back. Far off, a fountain ran and ran over its stone lip, with a sound like applause that never ended. "Tell me his name," the stranger said. She blinked. "Whose?" "Your husband's. The duke who does not exist." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. She could not tell, in the dark, whether it was sympathy or the beginning of amusement. "If I'm to be a man, I should like to know which lie I'm wearing." "I never gave him one." "You invented a duke and forgot to name him." "I invented a duke in a drawing room with my sister's whole life dropping out from under us, and I said the first thing that would make a cruel man set down his teacup." Her chin came up. "I said I had married above us all. I said the great house I had visited last autumn had a master, and the master had taken a fancy to a portionless girl with a sharp tongue, and we had married quietly in the north because his people disapproved. I made it grand and far away, and impossible to check inside a fortnight. I did not think he would follow me here. And here," the man said slowly, "is where, precisely. Do you know whose house this is?" The question struck her as so absurd, she almost laughed. "It is Ravensmere. Everyone knows it is Ravensmere. The Dowager Duchess opens it each midsummer because her nephew has not set foot in England in 4 years, and someone must keep the candles lit." She shook her head, impatient. "It does not matter whose house it is. It matters that there are 200 people in it, and one of them is Sir Felix Carmody, and he has come tonight for the express pleasure of asking me to produce my husband." The stranger was quiet a moment. The fountain applauded. The quadrille turned over into something slower. "Ravensmere," he repeated, and there was a new note under the gravel now, something she was too frightened to read. "And the master who has not set foot in England in 4 years," He is the Duke you did not name? I named no one. She was nearly weeping with the waste of these seconds. I left him faceless on purpose, because a faceless Duke cannot be contradicted. Will you do it, or will you not? I am asking you to stand beside me, and be cold and bored, and to call Sir Felix nothing in particular, and to take me out of that room before he can press me. That is all. You need not even speak. A duke who does not trouble to speak is only more convincing. You've given this a great deal of thought for a thing decided in a moment. I have given it 11 years of thought, she said. I only decided the moment tonight. For the first time he moved, covered her hand where it gripped his sleeve, briefly, with a palm that was warm and broad, and harder than a gentleman's ought to be. A hand that had held a rein and an oar, and perhaps a spade, and the steadiness of it went through her wrist and up into the frantic engine of her chest, and slowed it. Just slightly. The way a hand laid flat on a bolting horse's neck will sometimes reach the animal before the bit does. Cold, he said. Bored. Nothing in particular. I believe I can manage 2 of the 3. He took his hand away. What is your name, madam, before I marry you? Cassandra. Cassandra Ainsworth. She swallowed. Miss, still miss. Whatever I have told the world. Then for 1 hour, you are not. He offered his arm, offered it with an ease that snagged at her. The unstudied grace of a man who had handed a great many women up a great many steps and never once thought about it. Take it. You are shaking like a topsail, and they will see it from the windows. She took it. The wool of his sleeve was good, she registered distantly, finer under her fingers than the careless cut of it had promised. I do not know your name. No, he agreed. You don't. I cannot present a husband I cannot name. Then, call me Grey. He began to walk her toward the light, unhurried, as though the terrace and its 200 candles were a thing he had seen too often to fear. It is near enough true to sit easy in your mouth, and a man's Christian name from his wife's lips is more convincing than any title. Use it as though you are tired of using it. Grey, she said, testing it. There, already you sound as though you have quarreled with me over breakfast. A laugh broke out of her, appalled, helpless, entirely the wrong sound for a woman walking to her own undoing, and she pressed her gloved knuckles to her lips to stop it. Above them the terrace doors stood open on a blaze of gold, and the warm summer night poured its jasmine and its beeswax and its thin high violins down the steps to meet them, and she felt the stranger's arm steady as a beam beneath her hand, and she thought, I have lost my mind, and I have perhaps saved my sister, and I shall never know which until it is far too late to undo either. At the foot of the steps a footman in Ravensmere blue turned, saw them, and bowed low, lower than a stray couple from the garden could possibly warrant, his eyes going to the man at her side and then sliding away as though they had been burned. Sir, the footman said, and the word came out strangled, as though a larger word had been bitten in half behind it. Evening, Thomas, said the man called Grey, without slowing. Cassandra felt it as a small wrongness, a stitch dropped in the pattern, and had no leisure to examine it, because they had reached the top of the steps, and the ballroom of Ravensmere opened before her like the inside of a struck bell. It was the most beautiful room she had ever stood in, and she hated it with her whole frightened heart. 3 great chandeliers burned overhead, each one a frozen waterfall of light, and beneath them the floor was a moving garden, saffron silk and deep violet, peacock blue and amber, the colors turning and turning to the violins. The air was thick with hothouse roses and hot wax and the powder of 200 shoulders. A long mirror down the eastern wall threw the whole blazing carnival back at itself, so that the room seemed to contain twice as many people as the world could hold, and every one of them, she felt certain, was looking at her. Breathe, Grey murmured, not turning his head. You are a duchess. Duchesses are never impressed. They have seen grandeur, and were bored there too. I have never seen grandeur. Then it is fortunate that no one can hear your thoughts but me. His arm did not move, but somehow she was drawn a half-step closer to his side, settled there, anchored. Where is he? Your teacup man. She did not have to look far. Sir Felix Carmody stood near the great cold hearth, with a glass in his hand, and the particular ease of a handsome man, in a room he believed he had already won. He was handsome. That was the cruelty of him, the thing that had taken her father in, and half the county after, gold-haired, and clean-jawed, and dressed with the kind of expensive restraint that announced itself louder than any embroidery. He had a way of smiling that began and ended in the mouth, never troubling the eyes. And he was smiling now across the room at someone who was not Cassandra, which gave her 2 more seconds to school her face before his gaze swung, found her, and brightened with a pleasure that turned her stomach to water. There, she breathed. By the hearth. Gold hair. The blue coat. Do not look as though I told you. I never look as though I was told anything, Gray said. It is the chief advantage of a dull face. It was not a dull face. She had seen enough of it now, in the chandelier light, to know that a hard, weathered, watchful face, sun-darkened in a way no drawing-room kept its men, with a thin pale line of an old scar through one dark brow, and grey eyes that took the whole vast room in a single unhurried sweep and gave none of it back. Not a handsome face in Sir Felix's polished way, a face you would trust to get you off a foundering ship, and would not, afterward, be able to forget. Where had a secretary come by a face like that, she wondered, and a footman's beau, and a quarrel-tired Christian name he handed out like a coin he had plenty of. He is coming this way, she said, and the thought broke and scattered. Sir Felix came across the floor, with his glass still in his hand, parting the dancers without seeming to, and the smile reached her a full 5 seconds before he did. Miss Ainsworth. He let the miss fall with deliberate weight. A stone dropped down a well to hear how deep the lie went. Or must I learn some grander style tonight? You were so very married, last we spoke, so very eloquently married. I confess I have thought of little else on the road. Sir Felix. She gave him her hand, because to withhold it would be to declare war before her general had loaded. You are kind to think of me at all. Oh, I think of you a great deal. His eyes left her face and went, at last, to the man beside her, went up, because Gray stood half a head the taller, and Cassandra had the small savage pleasure of watching Sir Felix's smile cost him something to keep. And this will be the Duke, the famous absent husband, returned from the frozen north at last, and in such good time. This is my husband, Cassandra said. The words went out of her into the loud bright air, and could not be called back. She felt them leave the way you feel a step taken in the dark before your foot has found the stair, the lurch, the falling, the long instant before the ground arrives. This is my husband. Said aloud, in Ravensmere, under 3 chandeliers, to the cruelest man in 3 counties. Whatever happened now, she had said it, and the saying was a country she could never travel back out of. Carmody. Gray did not offer his hand. He looked at Sir Felix the way a man looks at weather he has decided not to go out in, without heat, without haste, with a complete and faintly tired knowledge of exactly how much trouble it intended to be. My wife tells me you have come a long way to see whether she exists. As you find, she does. You may set down your teacup. It was so near to the very phrase she had used in the garden that Cassandra's breath caught. He had been listening, every word, building her a husband out of her own panic, and Sir Felix's gold brows drew the smallest degree together. A man who had expected to find a costume, and had met, instead, a coat that did not give when he leaned on it. Forgive me, Sir Felix said. I have not the pleasure of your title. No, Gray agreed pleasantly. You have not. A silence opened. Around its edges the violins played on, and the dancers turned, oblivious, and a footman went by with a tray of lemon water that caught the light like a string of small moons, and the whole golden machine of the evening ran heedlessly over the place where 3 people stood very still. A man so retiring, Sir Felix said at last, recovering, his voice gone silken in the way that frightened Cassandra most, that even his name is a secret kept from his wife's oldest friends. How very romantic. I had heard the Master of Ravensmere was a recluse. I had not heard he had married. I had not, in truth, heard he was in England at all. The smile widened. Strange, is it not, that a wedding so grand should leave no track in any paper in the land? I made inquiries, you understand. On the road. A man does, when a fortune turns upon a lady's word. He turned the glass in his fingers. Not a line, not a band's reading, not a settlement, not a notice in the Morning Post. It is almost as though the Duchess of, he let it hang, an invitation over a pit, of somewhere sprang into being whole, last spring, in a drawing-room in Bath, with no husband attached but the one she could describe and never quite produce. Cassandra's mouth had gone to ash. He has the whole of it. He has had it all along. He only came to watch me drown in public. You went to a great deal of effort, Carmody, Gray said, to call a woman a liar in a borrowed coat. He had not raised his voice. He did not need to. The room seemed to lower itself around the level place where he spoke. Tell me, whose drawing room are you standing in tonight? The Dowager Duchess of Ravensmere's, of course. And how came you by your card? A flicker. Lady Pembroke was good enough to. You came on another woman's card, to another woman's house, to corner a girl half your weight and twice your wit, over a matter you might have settled with a letter. Gray studied him. I find I dislike you. It is restful. I so rarely meet a man about whom I need form no second opinion. 2 spots of colour had come up high on Sir Felix's cheekbones. You will produce your name, sir, or I will draw the only conclusion a sane man can draw, and I will draw it loudly. And your wife, your Grace. The voice came from Cassandra's left, and it was not Gray's, and it was not Sir Felix's. It belonged to an elderly man in Ravensmere blue, silver-headed, straight as a rule, the chain of a senior steward across his breast, and he had come to a halt a respectful pace away, and was bowing, deeply, gravely, with the unhurried completeness of a servant who has waited a long time to perform exactly this office, and his eyes were fixed not on Sir Felix, and not on Cassandra, but on the man she had pulled out of the dark of the yew-walk and married in a sentence. Forgive the interruption, Your Grace, the old steward said. The Dowager has been told of your arrival. She asks whether you will come to her, or whether she is to be kept waiting in her own drawing-room until she perishes of it. Her words. Your Grace, not mine. I am bidden to repeat them exactly. A pause, weighted with 40 years of service. Welcome home, sir. The house has felt it. The violins played on. Cassandra turned her head, very slowly, and looked up at the stranger whose arm she was holding, at the sun-dark face, the old scar through the brow, the grey eyes that had swept his own ballroom and given nothing back, and felt the entire blazing room tilt 1 quiet degree beneath her feet, like a deck when the tide takes hold of the keel, and understood, 2 heartbeats before her mind could form the words, that she had begged the Master of Ravensmere to pretend to be a duke, in the middle of his own house, and that he had let her. Your Grace, Sir Felix said faintly. My dear, said the man called Gray, looking down at Cassandra with something at the very back of the grey eyes that might, in a kinder hour, have been the beginning of laughter. I think we are discovered. Discovered, Cassandra repeated. The word came out of her without breath behind it, a husk of sound. The old steward had straightened from his bow and stood waiting, the steward's chain catching the chandelier light in a thin gold thread across his chest, and Sir Felix Carmody had gone the particular grey of a man who has set his whole weight against a door and found it was a wall. Your Grace, Sir Felix said again, and this time the title did not float. It dropped, leaden, out of his mouth, and she watched it land at his own polished feet. You said it more handsomely the first time. Gray did not look at him. He was looking down at Cassandra, and under the grey eyes there was that thing she could not yet name. A warmth banked very low, the way a fire is kept overnight under ash, Mortimer, he said to the steward, without turning, tell my aunt I am coming. Tell her I am bringing my wife. And tell her, gently, Mortimer, you have a gift for it, that she is to leave her face precisely as God arranged it when we come in. Because the first person who is astonished tonight will be astonished out into the garden. Very good, Your Grace. The faintest tremor disturbed the steward's gravity. Not alarm, Cassandra saw, but something nearer to joy held under guard. She will be composed. She will be nothing of the kind. But you will have warned her, which is all a man can do with my aunt. Mortimer bowed and withdrew, and the small, ordinary miracle of it, a servant melting back into a crowd, gave Cassandra a half-second in which to feel the floor under her slippers again before it was taken from her once more. Because Sir Felix had recovered. She saw it happen, saw the grey drain out of his cheeks and the gold come back, saw the smile reassemble itself, piece by piece, mouth first, the eyes last, and never quite. A handsome man does not stay astonished long. Astonishment is unbecoming, and Sir Felix had spent his life being becoming. Well, he said softly. Well, the Duke of Ravensmere. 4 years abroad, and he comes home to a wife no one has heard of, fetched up out of a Bath drawing-room with not a settlement to her name. He turned the glass in his fingers, and the lemon water in it shivered. How fortunate for Miss Ainsworth. How very fortunate. I came expecting to expose a liar, and instead I find a fairy tale. You will forgive a plain man his suspicions, Your Grace. They have served me where trust never did. I forgive plain men a great deal, Grace said. It is the elaborate ones I watch. A muscle moved at the corner of Sir Felix's jaw. The violins came to the end of their figure, and there was a scattering of gloved applause down the room, soft as rain on a window, and into that small lull Sir Felix leaned a half-inch closer and let his voice go down to where only the three of them could reach it. Enjoy your hour, madam, he murmured. Whatever it has cost you, I have a long memory and a longer road behind me, and somewhere on it is the truth of where you slept last spring, and with whom, and under what name. A duke may cover a great many sins with a great coat. He cannot cover them forever. He bowed, beautifully, the bow of a man who has been admired in better rooms than this. And to Grey, Your Grace, I shall hope to further our acquaintance. And he was gone, parting the dancers exactly as he had come, the blue coat swallowed by the saffron and the violet and the amber, and Cassandra found she had been holding the stranger's sleeve so hard her fingers ached. Breathe, Grace said, for the second time that night. He knows something. Her voice shook. About my sister. About last spring. He said with whom. He means Lydia. He means to Grey what last spring is, what he thinks he has. I must know what he. Not here. His hand came over hers again, that broad hard palm, and the steadiness of it reached her exactly as it had in the garden. Before the bit, before the bridal. 200 people, Miss Ainsworth, and a long mirror, and at least 4 of them lip-readers by trade. We will speak where the walls do not pass it on. First we go to my aunt, because if we do not, she will come to us, and you have not lived until you have been crossed by the Dowager Duchess of Ravensmere in front of a quadrille. He drew her hand more firmly through his arm. Walk, cold and bored. You have done it twice already. You have a gift for it I did not look to find in a woman who accosts strangers in shrubbery. I did not accost. She caught the look at the back of his eyes and stopped. You are laughing at me. I am admiring you. They look similar from the outside. Walk. They walked. And the strangest thing, the thing she would turn over in the small hours for nights afterward, was how the room changed shape around him as they went. She had crossed that floor an hour ago as a portionless girl in a made-over gown and felt the eyes slide off her like water off oiled cloth. No one's business. No one's concern. Now she crossed it on his arm, and the eyes did not slide. They clung. Whispers went ahead of them like a wind through standing wheat, bending heads together, lifting fans, and she heard her made-up self travel down the room faster than her own feet could. The Duke returned, and married. And that is she. That, nobody. That. Who is she? No one knows. Ravensmere. After 4 years, and she understood that she was being written into the history of the county in real time, sentence by sentence, by people who had not the smallest idea that the history was a lie she had told to save Lydia from a teacup. They are all looking, she said through a fixed and pleasant face. They are. It is the great defect of coming home. One is so looked at. He inclined his head a precise quarter-inch to a stout woman in puce who had risen half out of her chair to gape, and the woman sat down again, as though pressed. When I was a boy, I thought it was admiration. Then I thought it was envy. Now I find it is only appetite. They look at a duke the way a dog looks at a laden table, with hope, and no manners, and absolutely no intention of being useful. The appalled laugh tried to climb her throat again, and she swallowed it whole. You should not make me laugh. A duchess does not laugh. This one does. We shall be eccentric together. It is the only tolerable way to be married. He steered her through a tall doorway hung with summer roses already loosening in the heat, their petals dropping 1 and 2 onto the parquet. And the noise of the ballroom fell behind them like a closed lid, and they were in a long, cool gallery, where the candles burned in sconces instead of chandeliers, and the air smelled of beeswax and old paper, and the green breath of the gardens coming in through a row of open windows. It was quieter here. She could hear her own pulse, and his boots, and the small wet running of the fountain still applauding somewhere out in the dark. Before that door, Gray said, and stopped, and turned her to face him with a hand at her elbow. I will have 3 things from you. Quickly. Because my aunt is the cleverest person either of us will meet tonight, and she will find the seams in a heartbeat unless we have sewn them shut. His face in the sconce light was graver than it had been, the scar through the dark brow a pale thread. 1. Where were you married, you and I? Give me a church in a month and we will hold to it though the heavens fall. The north. I said the north. A chapel. I never named. Gretna will not do. You are too respectable, and I am too old for it. We were married at the chapel at Aldmarsh, on my northern land, in October, by my own chaplain, with no one present but my aunt's woman and a groom, because my people disapproved. He said it as smoothly as if he were reading it off a stone. There, it is even half true. There is a chapel at Aldmarsh, and a chaplain, and an aunt who will say what I tell her to say once I have explained to her why. 2. He looked at her steadily. Your sister, Lydia, what does Carmody hold over her, and how did he come by it? I cannot defend a flank I cannot see. And here was the thing she had not meant to give a stranger, the soft underside of the whole disaster, and she found she had no choice, because the stranger had become, in the space of an hour, the only wall between Lydia and the cold open mouth of the world.
A letter, she said, low. Lydia is 19. She feels everything at the very front of her skin. She always has. And last spring there was a young man, a Mr. Avery, a curate's son with nothing and the manners of an angel, and they were neither of them wicked, only young. And she wrote him letters. Foolish, warm, harmless letters. Letters that would mean nothing in a kinder hand and everything in a cruel one. Mr. Avery's people sent him to a living in Yorkshire, and the letters should have gone into the fire. And instead, her throat closed. Instead, one of them came to Sir Felix. I do not know how, he has never said. He came to me in Bath with it folded in his breast, and he smiled at me the way he smiles, and he said he had a tenderness for Lydia, and that he meant to have her, and that a girl whose letters he held could refuse him nothing without those letters becoming the talk of every drawing-room from Bath to Berkshire. And I... She stopped. Her hands had made fists in her gloves. I told him she was already spoken for. I told him our family had risen past his reach. I told him I had married a duke, and that my husband's name would close every door in England against any man who tried to shame a sister of his wife. I made it up out of air and terror in the space of a breath. And it worked. It stopped him. It bought us a season. And then he came here tonight to call the bluff. The gallery was very quiet. A rose petal let go of its bloom on the sill and turned over once in the air and landed without a sound. "And the third thing," Gray said after a moment, in a voice that had changed, though she could not have said how. "I find I no longer need to ask. I was going to ask why you did not go to your father, or your brother, or any of the men whose office it is to stand between a girl and a Carmody." His mouth was not unkind. "But you have no such men. Or you have them, and they are worse than nothing. That is why you were in the garden, accosting strangers." He let go of her elbow. "Cold and bored, Miss Ainsworth. We are going in." "You have not asked," she said, "the thing Sir Felix asked. Whether it is true, last spring, where I slept." "No," Gray agreed. "I have not." He looked at her a moment longer, and the warmth at the back of the grey eyes did not flicker. "I find I do not require an inventory of a woman's springs to know the shape of her. You came into a stranger's dark, not for yourself, but for a girl who writes warm letters. The rest is Carmody's filth, and I will not carry it for him." He offered his arm again. "Now, my aunt." The doors at the end of the gallery were tall and white and gold, and a footman opened them without being asked, and beyond them was a smaller, warmer room, a drawing room hung in dull rose silk, lit low, a fire kept against the faint chill that came in off the gardens after midnight, even in high summer. And before the fire, very upright in a chair that might have been a throne for all the comfort it allowed her, sat the Dowager Duchess of Ravensmere. She was old, and she was beautiful, the kind of old beauty that has nothing left to do but be precisely itself. Every line earned and kept, white hair dressed high, a gown of deep wine-coloured silk, a fan shut in her lap like a sheathed blade. Her eyes, when they came up, were her nephew's eyes exactly, grey, unhurried, and giving nothing back. "So," she said, "you are alive after all. I had begun to make other arrangements." "Aunt." Gray crossed to her and bent and kissed the offered cheek, and Cassandra saw, in the way the old woman's free hand came up and pressed briefly, fiercely, against his sleeve before falling away again, that whatever was about to be said with the mouth, something else entirely had already been said with the hand. Then the grey eyes left him and came to Cassandra, and travelled up and down her once, swift and total, the way a draper reads a bolt of cloth. "And this," said the Dowager, "is the wife Mortimer tells me I am to be unsurprised by. I shall do my best. It has been some years since I was surprised by anything but the impertinence of the young." The fan tapped once against her knee. "Come here, child, into the light. I cannot read you in the shadow, and I have made it a rule never to trust what I cannot read." Cassandra went. Her knees were water, and she made them carry her across the rose-coloured carpet and into the firelight, and there she stood, under the eyes that were Gray's eyes grown old and merciless, and she did the only thing she had left to do, which was to lift her chin and meet them. Said the Dowager Duchess at last. "Not a beauty in the simpering way. Better, there is a brain behind that face, which my nephew has always claimed to want, and never once before troubled to find." She turned the grey eyes on Gray. "Where did you get her?" "In the garden," Gray said, "an hour ago," and Cassandra's heart stopped. "Edmund," the Dowager's voice could have frosted the windows. "I have had a very long evening, and I am too old to be played with. Where? It is the truth, Aunt. I will not lie to you. I never have, and I have not the energy to begin tonight.
He stood at his ease before her, hands behind his back, a boy reporting to his governess, and a duke filling the room, both at once. I came home quietly, as you know, because I wished to look at my own house before 200 people looked at me looking at it. I walked up through the U-walk, and a young woman I had never seen took hold of my sleeve in the dark and begged me to be her husband for 1 hour, to save her sister from a man with a letter, and I found— He paused, and Cassandra held her breath. I found that I had been at sea for 4 years, and had forgotten what it was to be needed by anyone for anything that was not my name or my money. She did not know my name. She did not know my money. She knew only that she required a wall, and I have been a wall my whole life, and never once before tonight did anyone ask me to be one for them. The fire cracked. So I said yes. And then your steward bowed, and the hour became somewhat more complicated than either of us intended. The silence in the rose-colored room was a living thing. The Dowager Duchess looked at her nephew for a long moment. Then she looked at Cassandra, and something moved far down in the old grey eyes. Not warmth, not yet, but the cold, bright spark of a player who has been handed, after a tedious evening, a hand worth playing. "Sit down, Miss Ainsworth," Cassandra managed. "Cassandra Ainsworth, Your Grace." "Sit down, Miss Ainsworth. No, there, where the light falls on you. I like to watch a face while it answers me." Cassandra sat. The chair was hard. My nephew is a romantic, which is a thing no one believes of him because he hides it under a quantity of granite, but I have known him since he was a wet-headed boy weeping over a foundered colt, and I tell you he is a romantic, and romantics are dangerous, because they will set fire to a perfectly good life for the pleasure of warming their hands at it. The fan opened with a snap and moved, slow, deliberate. Here is what concerns me. By morning, every soul who stood in that ballroom will have written to every soul who did not, and by the end of the week the Duke of Ravensmere's sudden marriage will be the only subject worth discussing between here and London. There is no taking it back. You understand me, child? An hour ago this was a lie 2 people told in a garden. It is now a fact 200 people witnessed. The lie has become the truth by being seen, and the only question left is whether we make it a truth that holds, or a scandal that takes this family's name down with yours. "I never meant," Cassandra began. "No one ever means," the Dowager said. "The graveyards of reputation are paved with people who never meant. Hold your tongue and let me think." She thought. The fire burned. Out in the gardens the fountain ran on. And then the old woman's gaze sharpened to a point and fixed not on Cassandra, but on her nephew. "Carmody," Mortimer said. "Carmody is here, on Lady Pembroke's card." "Felix Carmody. You know him," Gray said. "I know his uncle, which is worse, and I know what the family wants, which is worst of all." The fan stopped. For the first time the Dowager Duchess looked, not old, but tired, a fatigue that had nothing to do with the hour. "Edmund, the Carmodys have been circling Ravensmere land for 2 generations. The strip along the river, the water meadows, the mill, the right-of-way to the northern fields. It has been entailed away from them since your grandfather's quarrel, and they have never forgiven it, and they have spent 30 years and a great deal of money looking for the smallest crack in this family, through which to drive a wedge. A duke who comes home and marries a girl out of a garden with no settlement, no family, and a sister with a careless pen. She let it hang. That is not a crack, child. That is an open gate. He did not come here tonight for your sister. Your sister is the lever. He came here for the river." Cassandra felt the cold travel up from the soles of her feet. She had thought herself the whole of the story, she and Lydia and the folded letter, and now the story opened out around her like the dark beyond a candle, and she saw that she had walked into the middle of a quarrel older than she was, and pulled the one man Sir Felix Carmody most wished to ruin out of the dark, and married him in front of the county. Then, "I have made it worse," she whispered. "I have given him exactly what he wanted. A scandal, and the Duke at the center of it." "You have given him a scandal," the Dowager agreed. "Whether it is a weapon or a wall depends entirely on what the 3 of us do before Thursday." She closed the fan. And it must be the three of us, because there is no longer any honest way out. If my nephew repudiates you tonight, he proves Carmody right, a duke gulled by an adventuress, a family that cannot govern its own doorstep. If you flee, you confirm every whisper, and ruin your sister into the bargain. No, there is only one road wide enough for all of us, and it is straight through the middle, and it is this. She drew a breath. You will be married. Truly, quietly. As soon as it can be done, without seeming to hurry. And until then, you will both behave, in every room, and before every eye, as though you have been married since October, at the chapel of Aldamsh, which, Edmund, I perceive you have already decided, because you have your lying face on, and I have not seen your lying face since you were 9. Aunt, do not aunt me. I have buried a husband and 2 brothers, and I will not bury this house's good name as well, for want of a little resolve in the people God has burdened me with. She turned the grey eyes, suddenly and fully, on Cassandra, and the old voice, gentled by a single degree, which from her was like a hand laid on a head. Can you do it, child? Not the wedding. Any fool can stand up before a chaplain. The other thing. Can you stand in a poisoned room, day after day on his arm, and be a duchess to a man you met in a hedge, with Felix Carmody watching every breath you take for the moment it slips? Because if you cannot, say so now, in this room, where it costs only my disappointment. Out there, it will cost a great deal more. Cassandra looked at the fire. She looked at the old woman with the sheathed fan. And then she looked at the man called Grey, at Edmund, Duke of Ravensmere, the wall she had pulled out of the dark, and found him already looking at her, with that low-banked warmth, asking nothing, demanding nothing, only waiting, as though her answer were a thing he would honor whichever way it fell. I came into a stranger's garden tonight, she said slowly, and asked him to be my husband for an hour. I find I am no longer the woman who was too frightened to do worse than that. She lifted her chin. Yes, I can do it. I do not know how. But I have been pretending to be braver than I am since I was 11 years old, and the pretending has always come true in the end, given enough of it. So, yes. Something crossed the Dowager Duchess's old face that might, in a softer woman, have been the beginning of respect. Good, she said briskly, and rose, and the years seemed to fall off her as she did it, leaving a general going into a campaign. Then we begin tonight. You will both return to the ballroom, yes, now, while the iron is hot, and you will dance, once, the 2 of you, in front of every gaping mouth in the county, because nothing in this world silences a whisper like a husband and wife who plainly do not care who is watching. Edmund, you will look at her as though there is no one else in the room. You used to be able to do it. I have seen you do it to horses. Miss Ainsworth, Cassandra, you will let him. She crossed to the door, and her hand was on it when she paused, and turned, and for one moment the player and the general both went out of her face, and left only an old woman who had loved a difficult boy for a very long time. Edmund, she said. 4 years. You wrote me from ports I had to find on a globe. You said you could not come home because there was nothing here you could bear to look at. Her voice did not shake, but it cost her not to. And tonight you walk up through the yews and find a girl in the dark and say yes to her before you have so much as crossed your own threshold. I am too old to believe in luck. But I find I am not too old to be glad of it. She opened the door. Now go and dance, before I weep in front of the staff and have to dismiss them all to cover it. The gallery was cool after the fire, and the rose petals still lay where they had fallen, and Cassandra walked back toward the noise of the ballroom on the Duke's arm, in a silence that had changed its quality entirely. The fear had not gone, but it had been joined, now, by something else. A strange grave exhilaration, the feeling of a swimmer who has stopped fighting the current and turned to ride it. You did not have to tell her, Cassandra said, when they had nearly reached the roses over the door. About the garden. You could have given her the lie whole. She would have believed it. From you. You told her the truth instead, and made it harder, and bound yourself to me before her eyes when an hour ago you owed me nothing. She stopped, and made him stop, and looked up at the hard, weathered face. Why? The Duke of Ravensmere was quiet a moment. Beyond the door, the violins had struck up a waltz, slow and sweet, and the candlelight came golden through the loosening roses, and somewhere among those 200 faces Sir Felix Carmody was waiting to see whether the wall would hold. Because in 4 years, he said at last, you are the first person who wanted something from me that I could give by being someone, rather than by paying for it, or signing it, or sailing away from it. He looked down at her, and the warmth was there, plain now, no longer banked. An hour ago, a frightened woman asked me to be a man instead of a name. I find I do not want to go back to being only a name. That is the whole of my reason, and it is a poor one, and I would not change it. He set his hand over hers on his sleeve. Now, my aunt has commanded a waltz, and she is not a woman one disobeys twice in one night. Can you dance, Duchess? Not well. Good. Then they will think you nervous of me, which is exactly what a new bride should be, and Carmody will read it as proof and choke on it. He drew her toward the golden doorway and the turning floor beyond. Cold and bored is finished, I think. We are past it. Tonight we try something far more dangerous. And what is that? We try, said the Duke of Ravensmere, as the roses brushed her bare shoulder, and the whole blazing room turned to watch them come, to look as though it is true. And they stepped out together into the light, and there, at the very edge of the floor, not 6 feet from where they must pass, stood Sir Felix Carmody with his lemon water and his beautiful smile, and beside him, on his arm, her gloved hand resting on his blue sleeve, and her face white as the petals underfoot, stood a slight girl of 19 with Cassandra's own dark eyes, who looked up and met her sister's gaze across the breadth of the gilded room, and mouthed, soundless beneath the violins, a single word that turned Cassandra's blood to river water. Lydia. He had brought her. He had brought Lydia into the lion's house, on his own arm, under 200 eyes, and he was smiling, as he bent his gold head and said something into the girl's ear that made her flinch, and never once took his pale gaze from Cassandra's face. Her feet wanted to carry her straight across the floor, through the turning silk and the candle heat, to that white face and those dark eyes, and the Duke's arm did not let them. No, he said, very low, bending his head as though he murmured an endearment. Look at me. Not at her. If you cross this room to her now, you will have run to Carmody's hand like a hare to the snare, in front of 200 people, and he will have what he came for before the violins have finished tuning. He has my sister. Her voice came out of her in splinters. On his arm. In this house. He has Lydia, Edmund, and you would have me dance, I would have you think. His grey eyes held hers, steady, merciless, kind. He has brought her here for precisely one reason, to make you bolt. A bolting woman is a guilty woman. A duchess who glances at a frightened girl and then dances with her husband is a woman with nothing on her conscience, and a sister she is faintly sorry to see in poor company. Which do you wish the room to remember tomorrow? The waltz had begun. All around them couples were folding into it, the whole bright garden of the floor revolving slow and sweet, and to stand still at its edge was already to be looked at. She felt the looks gather like weather. I cannot leave her there, Cassandra whispered. You will not leave her there. You will leave her there for the length of one dance, which is the most expensive 3 minutes you will ever spend, and at the end of it she will be safer than she is now, because the whole county will have watched the Duchess of Ravensmere refuse to be hurried. His hand found the small of her back. Trust the wall, Cassandra, you hired it. Let it stand. And because there was nothing else, no other road, no door that did not open onto worse, she went into his arms. He danced as he did everything, without seeming to trouble himself, and the trouble was all hidden in how easy it looked. His hand was warm through her glove, and the wool of his coat smelled of cedar and salt, and something green from the gardens, and under the cedar there was the faint, clean burn of the candles, and the sweetness of the loosening roses. And beneath all of it the heat of 200 bodies, turning in a closed bright room on a summer night. She had told him the truth in the garden. She did not dance well. But he turned her as a current turns a leaf, and her feet found the figure they did not know, and she understood that he was not leading her so much as carrying her, and letting the room believe it was a waltz. "Smile," he said. "Not at them. At me. As though I have said something only you may laugh at. I have nothing to laugh at. My sister is across the room with a wolf. Then laugh at the wolf. It is the one thing he cannot bear, and the one thing he can do nothing about." A glint moved at the back of the grey eyes. He has spent 30 years learning to be feared. He has no defense at all against being found amusing. "Smile, Duchess. Show him your teeth and let him wonder whether you are charmed or sharpening them." She smiled. It cost her everything she had, and it came out, she suspected, more wolfish than charmed. But across the turning floor she saw Sir Felix Carmody's gold head lift a fraction, saw the polished smile check itself for half a heartbeat, and she felt, for the first time that night, the small, fierce pleasure of having struck a blow instead of only catching them. "There," Edmund said softly. "You have just frightened him more than I have managed in an hour. Do it again on the turn." They turned. The chandeliers wheeled overhead in their frozen waterfalls of light. The long mirror down the eastern wall threw the whole carousel back doubled, so that she danced past 100 versions of herself, each one a duchess she had never been until tonight. Past the gilt and the mirror she kept Lydia at the edge of her eye, the slight figure motionless in dove-grey muslin, the dark head bent, Sir Felix's gloved hand resting on her wrist, with the lightness of a man who knows the bird cannot fly. Once, on a turn, their gazes met across the breadth of the room, and Cassandra put into hers everything she could not cross the floor to say. "Hold. I am coming." "Hold," and Lydia's chin lifted by a hair, and Cassandra knew the message had landed, and her heart broke and steadied in the same beat. "He is using her like a draught at chess," she said through her smile. "A small piece pushed forward to make me move a large one. He is. It is the only kind of game he knows. He has never in his life wanted a thing for itself, only for the lever it makes." Edmund's hand tightened a degree at her back, drawing her through the close press of another couple. "Which is also why he will lose. A man who wants only levers has never learned what people will do for the thing itself. He cannot calculate it, because he has never felt it. He looks at you and your sister and sees a weakness. He does not understand that he is looking at the one force in this room that does not answer to him." The music swelled and gentled. She was aware, distantly, that they had become the center of the floor, that the other dancers had given them room without seeming to, the way water gives room to a keel, and that the whispering had risen to a soft, continuous rush under the violins. The Duke and his bride. Look how he looks at her, and the dreadful thing, the thing that turned her bones to water and would not let her go, was that he was looking at her, that the grey eyes had not left her face for the length of the dance, and that whatever his art had bidden him perform, what she saw in them now did not have the careful surface of performance. "Stop," she breathed. "You will undo me. You look at me as though it is true," he finished. "Yes, my aunt commanded it. I find I am obeying her with more ease than I had bargained for." The corner of his mouth moved. "It is the first command of hers in 20 years that has cost me nothing at all." And then the violins drew their long last note up into the rafters and let it fall, and the waltz was over, and the room broke into the soft rain of gloved applause, and Cassandra came out of his arms into the cooler air, with her face flushed, and her heart going like a hammer, and the whole impossible night still to be got through. And across the floor, Sir Felix Carmody was already moving toward them, with Lydia drawn close on his arm, and the beautiful smile fixed in place. And behind them, unhurried, came the silver head of old Mortimer, the steward, who had appeared from nowhere, as the good ones always did. "Your Grace." Mortimer bowed, and contrived, in the bow, to put himself half a pace between the advancing blue coat and the Duke, an old soldier taking ground without appearing to move. "The Dowager bids me say that she has seen the dance, that it answered, and that you are neither of you to gild it by lingering on the floor like a pair of lovesick under-gardeners. Her words, Your Grace. I am bidden to repeat them exactly." "You always are," Edmund said. "It is the chief duty of my office, sir. A man who repeats Her Grace inexactly does not keep his office long, nor, I sometimes think, his soul." The old man's face never moved, but something at the very back of his eyes was perfectly aware of the joke it had made, and Cassandra felt a thread of warmth go through her terror that she had not expected and could have wept for. Then, Mortimer's gaze went past her shoulder to the gold-haired man bearing down on them, and the warmth in it cooled to courtly frost. "Sir Felix." "And the young lady? Shall I find the young lady a chair? She has the look of one who has been a long time standing." "My charge is quite content where she is," Sir Felix said, and the word charge fell among them like a coin onto stone. "Are you not Miss Ainsworth?" "The younger Miss Ainsworth, I should say. There are so very many duchesses, and almost about tonight. A plain man grows confused." He drew Lydia forward, and Cassandra saw at close range what the breadth of the floor had hidden. The girl's lips bloodless, the fine tremor in the hand that lay captive on the blue sleeve, the brightness in the dark eyes that was not gaiety, but the held edge of tears. "Cassandra," Lydia said, and her voice shook on the two syllables. "I did not. He came to the house. He said you had sent for me, he said." "He lied," Cassandra said. The word came out flat and clean, and it was the most truthful thing she had said all night. She put out her hand. "Come to me, dearest. Come here." Lydia moved, and Sir Felix's gloved hand closed, gentle as a glove and final as a lock, over the small wrist on his arm, and the girl stopped as though she had reached the end of a tether. In a moment, Sir Felix said pleasantly, "We are all of us such old friends, are we not? And old friends have so much to say. I should so dislike to break up the party." His pale eyes moved from Cassandra to the Duke, and back, and the smile thinned to its working edge. "Your Grace, a word. Privately, you and your wife and myself, somewhere the music does not carry. I have come a very long way, and I find I am no longer content to make my enquiries over a quadrille. 5 minutes. A card room. After which, I give you my word as a gentleman, I shall trouble your evening no further." He let the smile widen. "Tonight, and my sister," Cassandra said, "will wait for you. I am sure Mr. Mortimer will be glad to find her that chair." The hand did not loosen. "She is quite safe. I have never in my life harmed a young woman, Miss Ainsworth. I have only ever told the truth about them. It is a far more lasting injury, and it leaves no mark on the hand that deals it." Cassandra looked at the Duke. Some part of her, the part that had spent 11 years calculating every exit before she entered a room, was screaming that this was the snare itself, the quiet door, the private word. That a man like Carmody did not ask for privacy in order to be merciful in it. But Lydia stood white and tethered 6 feet away, and every minute the girl stood there on that arm was a minute she was being written into the same poisoned history, and there was no version of the night in which Cassandra walked away and left her there. 5 minutes, Edmund said, before she could answer. His voice had gone very level, the granite his aunt had spoken of, the green card room, off the East Passage. "Mortimer will see you to it. My wife and I will come directly." He looked at Sir Felix without heat. "And the girl comes too. Carmody. You will not sit her in a chair like a forfeited glove while you bargain over her in the next room. If she is the subject of your enquiry, she will hear it made. I do not permit business done about a person behind her back in my own house. It is one of a great many things I do not permit. You will find the list grows the longer you stay." For a moment the two men looked at one another, and the whole golden roar of the ballroom seemed to draw back from the small, cold space between them. Then Sir Felix inclined his gold head, and the smile reassembled, and he said, "As your grace pleases." The more witnesses the better, I always find. Truth so dislikes a small audience. And he turned, drawing Lydia with him, and went toward the east passage, with Mortimer pacing him stride for stride, like a gaoler who has not yet decided which of them is the prisoner. Edmund. Cassandra caught his sleeve as the crowd closed behind the blue coat. It is a trap. You know it is a trap. He does not want a private word. He wants us out of the lit room and away from the witnesses, where he can say a thing he dare not say to 200 people. I know exactly what he wants. Edmund covered her hand on his sleeve. He wants to find the seam. He has been pressing the join between you and me all night, looking for the place where the glue is still wet. So we will give him a room, and a door, and 5 minutes, and we will let him press, because the only way to learn what a man holds is to let him reach for it, and I would a great deal rather see his weapon drawn in a card room than feel it in my back at the breakfast table for the next 40 years. He drew her hand through his arm. Whatever he says in there, Cassandra, whatever he lays on the table, do not flinch, and do not look at me to see how I take it. Look at him. Let him do the bleeding. And if what he lays on the table is true, something passed behind the grey eyes, not doubt, she thought, but the careful watchfulness of a man who has just felt a board give underfoot. Then we shall both of us learn it at the same moment, he said, and we shall deal with it as we have dealt with everything since the U-walk. Together, and faster than he expects. He pressed her hand once. Come. The wall is coming with you into the small room. That is the whole point of a wall. The green card room lay at the end of the east passage, a low, quiet chamber lined in bottle green silk, lit by 2 branches of candles on a baize table where no cards were laid. The summer night came in through a half-open window, and on the still air rode the green, wet breath of the gardens and the far ceaseless running of the fountain. Mortimer stood at the door like a carved thing. Lydia had been let go at last, and had flown straight into Cassandra's arms, and Cassandra held her, and felt the bird-quick heart against her own, and murmured into the dark hair, "I have you. I have you, hush. I have you," while over the girl's bent head she watched Sir Felix Carmody draw a folded paper from his breast and lay it on the green baize with the tenderness of a man laying down a winning hand. "I shall be brief," he said, for the young lady's sake, since his grace is so very tender of her feelings. He sat, uninvited, and turned the folded paper a quarter turn on the cloth so that it faced the Duke. "There is the letter, one of several, but one is enough, as one match is enough for one barn. Miss Lydia Ainsworth to Mr. Thomas Avery, dated the 3rd of April last, and as warm a piece of foolishness as ever a girl set her name to. I shall not read it aloud. I am not a brute." The smile. "But I will say that it would not survive the morning papers, and neither, I think, would the writer's prospects, nor the prospects of any house that had been so unwise as to ally itself to hers." "You have made your enquiries," Edmund said. He had not touched the letter. "You have come a long way to threaten a child with her own handwriting. Is that the whole of your hand, Carmody? Because if it is, I confess myself disappointed. I had been told you were dangerous." "Oh, that is not the whole of my hand." Sir Felix leaned back, and the candlelight slid up the planes of his beautiful face, and found nothing soft in any of them. "That is merely the part I am content the young lady should see. The rest concerns her sister, and is of a richer vintage altogether." His pale eyes came to rest on Cassandra, and she felt the look go over her like cold water. "Tell me, Your Grace, has your wife ever spoken to you of the 3 Hares, at Cheltenham? A modest house. Clean, discreet. The sort of inn where a woman may take a room for a night, and no one troubles to know her business, provided she gives a name, of course. They are particular about the register, even there." Cassandra's arms went rigid around her sister. The room tilted, The candle flames swam, and she heard her own pulse in her ears, louder than the fountain. Last spring, Sir Felix went on, gently, savouring it, in the 3rd week of April, a little after the date of that touching letter, a young woman took a room at the Three Hares under the name of Mrs. Mary Hartley. She came alone, after dark, in a hired chaise. She stayed the one night, and before morning she was seen in the private parlour, alone, by candlelight, with a young man not her husband, a curate's son, as it happens, lately bound for a living in Yorkshire, to whom she handed a purse, and from whom she received a packet of papers, and with whom she was closeted for above an hour with the door shut. He spread his hands. I have the register. I have the chambermaid. I have the boy who held the horses. What I do not yet have, Your Grace, is your wife's account of how the Duchess of Ravensmere came to spend a night under a false name in a Cheltenham inn, buying back her sister's indiscretions with money she did not have, 6 months before you say you married her, and 4 years into a voyage from which, by every account in England, you had not yet returned. The silence in the green room was absolute. Even the fountain seemed to hold its breath. Cassandra, Lydia whispered, lifting her head, her face stricken white. You never. You told me you sent a man. You told me you paid a man to go. You never said you went yourself. Hush, dearest. Cassandra's lips were cold. She did not look at the Duke. She had been told not to look at him, and now she found she could not have borne to, because the whole edifice of the night, the wall, the together and faster than he expects, depended on a man believing in a woman he had known for 2 hours, and she was about to ask him to believe the worst-sounding truth she owned. It is, yes, it is true that I went. It is true that I gave a false name, because to give my own would have been to print the very scandal I went to bury, and it is true that I met Mr. Avery alone, and bought my sister's letters back from him for £40 I borrowed against my mother's pearls, and came home before light with them sewn into my stays. She made herself lift her chin. There is your knight under a false name, Sir Felix, a girl of 23, alone, paying a frightened curate's son to give back the foolish letters of a girl of 18, so that no one should ever be able to do to my sister exactly what you are doing to her now. That is the whole of it. There is no lover in it. There is no sin in it, but the sin of being poor, and a woman, and obliged to save a child myself, because there was no man in my family who would stir to do it. A very pretty account, Sir Felix said softly, and entirely unprovable, whereas the register, the chambermaid, and the horseboy are not pretty at all, and are entirely provable, and tell, to any drawing-room in England, a story with a great many fewer pearls in it, and a great deal more candlelight. He rose. His Grace may believe you. His Grace, I begin to think, would believe you if you told him the moon was a curd cheese. He has the look of a man enjoying his own foolishness too much to stop. But His Grace's aunt will not. The Carmody trustees will not. And the Morning Post most certainly will not, when I lay the register before them, with the dates set beside the dates of your impossible northern wedding, and let all of England do the arithmetic of where the Duke of Ravensmere's bride was sleeping, and under what name. While the Duke of Ravensmere was off the coast of Portugal, he retrieved the folded letter from the baize and slid it back into his breast. Then it will not signify whether you are honest. It will only signify that you are interesting. And there is no surviving being interesting, Miss Ainsworth. Not in this country. You of all women know that. Cassandra forced herself, at last, to turn her head, to look at the Duke, because she could no longer bear not to know. Edmund's face had not moved. But something had gone out of it, and something else had come in, and for one endless beat she could not read which, and the not reading was the worst thing that had happened to her all night. Worse than the garden, worse than this is my husband, worse than the steward's bow. The wall she had hired, the wall she had begun, terribly, to lean upon as though it were her own, had gone still and grey and unreadable, and she thought, he believes it. Whatever I have said, The dates are against me, and the candlelight is against me, and a man does not stake a dukedom on a stranger he met in a hedge. This is the moment the wall remembers it is only a wall, and steps back, and lets the weather in. "What do you want, Carmody?" Edmund said. It was not a question. His voice had gone flat and far away. "Now we are speaking as men." Sir Felix smiled. "The water meadows. The mill. The right-of-way to the northern fields. The strip your grandfather entailed away from my family in his spite, and which has sat there 40 years like a bone in our throat. Sign the reversion to me, quietly, a private deed, drawn and witnessed before Thursday. Do that, and the register burns, the letters burn, the chambermaid forgets her own name, and the Duke of Ravensmere keeps his mysterious bride, and his unblemished honour, and his pretty story. And I take my bone and go home, and we none of us ever meet again." He drew on his gloves, finger by finger. Refuse, and on Friday morning all of England reads about Mrs. Mary Hartley of the Three Hares. The choice is entirely yours, Your Grace. I find I have made it very simple. I do so dislike a complicated bargain. He bowed. "I shall give you until Thursday noon. The young lady I return to your keeping. A gesture of good faith. You will find I can be generous when generosity costs me nothing. And to Cassandra, last, soft, for her alone. Sleep well, Mrs. Hartley." He went out. Mortimer stood aside to let him pass, and then closed the door behind him, with a click that sounded, in the green silence, like the cocking of a lock, and the three of them were left in the candlelight, with the fountain running on outside, and the night air coming green and indifferent through the window. Lydia began, very quietly, to weep. Cassandra gathered her in without looking, her own eyes fixed on the Duke, who had walked to the half-open window and stood with his back to them, one hand flat on the sill, looking out into the dark where the lamps of the garden made their long gold bars across the gravel. Exactly, she thought wildly, as the candlelight had lain across the gravel of the yew-walk an hour and a lifetime ago, when she had taken hold of a stranger's sleeve and ruined them both. "Edmund," she said. The name came out cracked. "I should have told you. In the gallery, when you asked me what he held over Lydia, and I told you the letter, and I did not tell you the rest, because the rest is mine, and not hers and I. I did not think he had it. I did not know there was a register. I did not know I had been seen." She swallowed. "But I will not stand here and let you wonder. It is true, all of it, the inn and the name and the hour with the door shut, and it is also exactly as I have said. And there is no third version where it is worse, because there is nothing worse to be. I went to a Cheltenham inn under a false name to save my sister, and I would do it again tomorrow, and I am not sorry. And if that is a thing you cannot have tied to your name then, you must say so now. Tonight, while it costs only," her voice failed, "while it costs less than it will cost on Friday." For a long moment the Duke of Ravensmere did not move, and did not speak, and the wall was only a man's broad back against an open window, giving nothing away. Then he said, without turning, in a voice gone strange and low, "Mary Hartley." It was the first plain name that came to me. I never thought to. Hartley was my mother's name. He turned, and his face, when she saw it, was not the closed grey wall she had braced for. It was something rawer and far more dangerous. The face of a man who has been struck somewhere he forgot he could be reached. Before she married my father, she was Mary Hartley, of Aldhamsh, and she went to her own quiet wedding under the disapproval of his people, exactly as we have invented you did, and she spent her whole life being told she was beneath the name she had been given. He came toward her across the small green room. You reached into the air, in a panic, on the worst night of your life, and pulled out my mother's name to hide a kindness in. You could not have known. There is no way under heaven you could have known. And I find I cannot stand here and listen to that man use it as a whip without. He stopped. His hand had closed, hard, at his side. He has handed me the river, he said, and asked me to choose between my land and my honor and your good name. And he believes I will spend 3 days agonizing over it like a gentleman in a play. And will you not? She whispered. No. The grey eyes burned, because there is a thing he does not know, that I have known since I was 9 years old, and it is this. A Hartley does not buy her way out of being interesting. She makes them choke on it. He took her cold hand in both of his. Cassandra, listen to me, and do not look at your sister, and do not weep, because we have not the time. I am not going to sign him the river, and I am not going to let him print the register. There is a third road, and it is narrow, and it runs straight at him, and it will require you to be braver before Thursday than any sane woman has been asked to be in a single week. His grip tightened. But I cannot walk it without doing one thing first, that I have no right to ask of you, and that you have every right to refuse. And that, once done, cannot be undone, by me, or by you, or by all the lawyers in England. Do you understand me? No, she said. I understand nothing. I understand only that he has my whole life folded in his breast and 3 days to set fire to it. Then, understand this much. He drew her a half-step closer, and the candlelight caught the old pale scar through his brow, and his voice dropped until it was for her alone, under the running of the fountain, under her sister's quiet weeping, under the whole golden heedless roar of the ball going on beyond the door, as though no world had ended in this green room. I am going to go back into that ballroom in 5 minutes, and I am going to stand my aunt in the center of the floor and stop the music. And I am going to tell 200 people the one thing that will pull every fang from Carmody's mouth at a single stroke and bind you to this house so fast that no register in Cheltenham can ever shake you loose. And I cannot tell you what it is before I do it, because if you knew, you would stop me. And you would be right to stop me. And I would let you, and then your sister would be undone by Friday. He lifted her hand and pressed his mouth to her cold-gloved knuckles, once hard, a thing no pretend husband had any business doing. So I am going to ask you to trust the wall one final time, with no inventory and no account and no proof, exactly as you asked me to trust you, an hour ago, in the dark. Will you? Beyond the door, the violins were tuning for the supper dance. Lydia had gone silent in her arms. And Cassandra Ainsworth stood in the green candlelit room, with her sister's life, and her own folded in a stranger's breast, and a wall she had hired about, to do something irrevocable in her name, and understood that she had come, at last, to the edge she had been walking towards since she first caught his sleeve, the one step past which there was no garden left to go back to, for either of them. Edmund, she said, what are you going to do? And the Duke of Ravensmere only looked at her, with the burning grey eyes and his mother's name on his lips, and did not answer, and turned, and opened the door onto the blaze of light, and the watching faces, and the gold head of Sir Felix Carmody, just visible at the far side of the floor, and walked out into it to do the thing she had not given him leave to do. The ballroom took him back the way deep water takes a thrown stone, a brief closing over, a ripple, and then the whole bright surface turning to find the place where he had gone in. Cassandra came after him 3 steps behind, Lydia's cold hand locked in her own, the heat of 200 candles striking her in the face like an opened oven, the roses over the door brushing one last loosened petal down the back of her neck. The violins were tuning for the supper dance, that small ragged sweetness of strings finding one another, and over it she heard Edmund say one word to the leader of the band. Quiet, unhurried, and the tuning stopped. The silence that fell was the loudest thing in the room. My lords, ladies, the Duke of Ravensmere stood in the center of his own floor with his hands behind his back, and he did not raise his voice, and the not raising of it pulled every head around faster than a shout. You will forgive an interruption. I have been 4 years from England, and I find I have lost the knack of waiting for a convenient hour to say a true thing. My aunt will tell you it was never a knack I had. A ripple of uncertain laughter. The Dowager Duchess had risen from somewhere near the hearth, wine-dark silk and white hair, and crossed to stand at her nephew's shoulder, with her fan shut in her hand like a marshal's baton, and her face was arranged precisely as God had set it. which was a feat Cassandra would honor her for to the end of her days. "You have heard, this evening, that I came home married," Edmund said. "You have heard of a quiet wedding in the north, last October, at a chapel on my own land, with my people disapproving. It is a very pretty story." He paused. The candle flames stood straight in the breathless air. "It is not a true one. There was no wedding in October. I will not stand in my mother's house, under my mother's roof, and let a falsehood be told for me, however kindly it was meant, and by whatever frightened person was driven to invent it." Cassandra's heart went over a cliff. He has done it. He has cut the rope with us both still on it. She felt the room's eyes begin, like a tide turning, to swing toward her. The nobody on the threshold, the made-over gown. And she made herself stand and take it, chin up, because there was nowhere left in England to hide. "Here is the true story," the Duke went on, "and you may make of me what you like for telling it, for I find I no longer greatly care. I came up through the yew walk tonight in the dark, before I had crossed my own door, because I wished to look at my house one quiet minute before it looked at me. And a young woman I had never seen in my life took hold of my sleeve and begged me, a stranger, a man she believed to be a secretary or a guest of no importance, to stand between her sister and a gentleman in this room who has made it his evening's business to trade upon a girl's private letters." The grey eyes swept the floor once and came to rest, mild and terrible, on a gold head at the far side of it. "She asked nothing of my name. She did not know it. She asked nothing of my fortune. She did not know I had one. She asked only that I be, for 1 hour, a wall between a child and a cruelty, and I have been wanted for my name and my acres my whole life, and never once, until tonight, for the plain use of my shoulders. So I said yes." The whisper that ran the room was a wind through standing wheat, and the long mirror down the eastern wall threw it back doubled. "That is the woman I mean to marry," said the Duke of Ravensmere. "Openly, and soon, and in the daylight, with the banns read 3 Sundays like any farmer's son. Her name is Cassandra Ainsworth. And a year ago, with no father and no brother who would stir himself, she went alone to buy back her sister's foolish letters from the boy who held them, and paid for them with her own mother's pearls, and told no one, and asked no thanks. If there is a soul in this room who finds that a scandal, I will be glad to know your name, so that I may be sure never to ask you to mind anything of mine." Nobody spoke. Somewhere a fan stopped moving. And into that vast gilded hush, from the far side of the floor, came the soft, unhurried sound of Sir Felix Carmody, beginning to applaud. He came forward through the parting dancers with his hands meeting slow and his beautiful smile fixed in the candlelight, and Cassandra felt Lydia flinch against her side, and held her, and did not move. "Charming," Sir Felix said. "Truly, a wall, a brave girl, a duke's broad shoulders, it wants only music. But you have left out the prettiest part, your grace, in your hurry to be honest, and a plain man like myself does so hate an unfinished tale." He stopped a careful 6 feet off, where the whole room could hear, and from his breast he drew the folded packet and held it up to the light. "Shall I tell them where Miss Ainsworth slept last spring? And under what name? Shall I tell them the name, your grace? For I think you will find it spoils your love story considerably." "Tell them," Edmund said. The word landed flat and clean on the parquet and lay there, and Cassandra saw Sir Felix check, saw the smile cost him something to hold, for he had brought a match to a barn and been invited, courteously, to strike it. "You wish me to. I wish you to do the thing you came 2 counties to do, and let us all watch you do it." The Duke had not moved. "You have stood in my house since 10 o'clock with that paper against your heart like a love token. You have frightened a girl of 19, and cornered her sister over a quadrille, and asked me privately for a strip of river in exchange for your silence. You came on a card you begged off Lady Pembroke, who I see has gone the colour of her own gown to hear it. Now you have your audience, Carmody, 200 strong, and every one a gossip. Read it out. Tell the room the name." Sir Felix's pale eyes flicked, once to the watching faces, and Cassandra understood, in that flick, the whole architecture of the man, that his power had only ever been the threat of the telling, the held match, the lever, that a secret spoken aloud was a coin spent and gone, that he had no notion in the world what to do when the man he meant to bleed pushed back his own sleeve and offered the vein. "The name," he said, recovering, lifting the paper, "is Mary Hartley. Mrs. Mary Hartley, of the Three Hares at Cheltenham, 3rd week of April, a woman alone after dark in a hired chaise, closeted an hour with a young man not her. Hartley was my mother's name." Edmund said it without heat, and it cut through Sir Felix's rising voice like a keel through a wave, and the gold head jerked up. "My mother was Mary Hartley of Oldhamshire," the Duke said, to the room now, not to the man, who married my father against the wishes of his people, and was told to the end of her life that she was beneath the name she carried. Miss Ainsworth reached into the air on the worst night of her life and pulled out Mary Hartley to hide a kindness behind, and she could no more have known it was my mother's than she could have known the man in the yew-walk was a duke. But I know it, and I will not stand here and listen to a Carmody use my mother's name as a whip, in my mother's house, to extort my grandfather's river out of me. His voice never rose, and the room leaned into it as a field leans to a coming storm. "There is your whole hand, sir, face up on the cloth, a girl's letters that you stole, an honest woman's brave knight that you have dressed in candlelight to sell, and a strip of meadow my grandfather entailed away from your family 40 years ago for cause, and that no deed of mine could sign to you tonight if I wished to, as you have always known, which is why you came armed with scandal instead of a solicitor." The grey eyes pinned him. "It is spent now, Carmody. You have struck your match in the open, and there is no barn. What is left?" For one long moment, Sir Felix Carmody stood beautiful and gold and utterly alone in the centre of the most crowded room in 3 counties, and Cassandra watched the smile come apart at last, not all at once, but the way frost goes off glass, edge first, until there was nothing left of it but the cold flat surface beneath. 2 spots of colour stood high on his cheekbones. His hand, holding the packet, had begun, very slightly, to shake. "You think the county will take her word," he said, low and venomous, all the silk burned off it now. "An adventuress out of a hedge. A nobody with a sister who writes to curates." "I think," said a new voice, old, dry, and carrying the whole length of the floor without seeming to try, "that the county will take mine." The Dowager Duchess of Ravensmere stepped forward, and the fan opened in her hand with a snap, like a closing trap. "I knew your uncle, Felix Carmody, and I know what your family has wanted off this river since before you were breached. And I know to a shilling what your trustees have spent these 30 years trying to find a crack in this house wide enough to crawl through. And I am telling this room, every soul of which will write to every soul who is not here, by the 2nd post tomorrow, that I, Augusta, Duchess of Ravensmere, have known the truth of Cheltenham these 6 hours, and that I count Cassandra Ainsworth the bravest girl I have met in 40 years of being bored by braver claims, and that any house which cuts her, cuts me, and may discover at its leisure how comfortable an enemy I make." She turned her grey eyes, slow, deliberate, upon the puce-gowned woman near the wall. "Lady Pembroke, you are so good as to lend Sir Felix your card. I am sure you will be equally good as to see him to his carriage. The night air, I find, has quite spoiled." It was over, and the room knew it was over a half-second before Sir Felix did. Cassandra heard it travel, a sound she had never heard before and would never forget, the soft collective intake of 200 people deciding, all at once, the same thing, and the thing they decided was not him. The looks that had clung to her all night left her entirely, and fastened on the gold-haired man with the shaking hand. And they were not the looks of appetite now. They were the cold curiosity a crowd turns on a thing already fallen. "The letters," Edmund said quietly. He had crossed the small distance between them, and he stood now near enough that only the front rank could hear, his voice gone level and final as a closing door. "You will leave them. Here, on that table, where my wife can reach them. You hold a child's private foolishness, Carmody, and you have carried it against your heart all night like a brave man carrying a flag. And you will set it down before you go, or I will say, loudly, to this entire room, exactly how you came by it. And I have had 4 years at sea to learn how a thing is got out of a frightened curate, and I will spare you no syllable of the telling. Sir Felix looked at the Duke. He looked at the old woman with the opened fan. He looked, last, at Cassandra, and whatever he saw in her face, standing there with her sister's heart beating against her arm, took the final inch of starch out of him. He crossed to the long baize console beneath the eastern mirror, and he laid the folded packet upon it, the paper whispering against the cloth, and he straightened his cuffs, finger by finger, the way he had drawn on his gloves in the green room a lifetime ago. "You will regret being interesting," he said. It came out a husk of the thing he had meant. "Very likely," Cassandra answered, and her voice did not shake, and the wonder of that went through her like cold water. "But I shall regret it on my own land, Sir Felix, with my own name, beside my own people, which is more than your uncle managed, and more than you will, and that, I think, is the whole of the difference between us. Good night. Mind the step. The gravel is treacherous in the dark. I nearly came to grief on it myself, not 3 hours ago, before a stranger steadied me. She did not know where the words came from. They came from 11 years of swallowing them." And Sir Felix Carmody bowed, a stiff, ruined automatic bow, the body's last loyalty to a manner the man had lost, and turned, and went the length of that blazing floor alone, with Lady Pembroke trailing scarlet behind him, and the whispers folding shut over the blue coat, like water over a sinking thing, and the great gilded doors took him, and he was gone. Cassandra crossed to the console before her knees could fail her, and picked up the packet, and the paper was warm from his breast, and she hated the warmth of it, and she unfolded the outermost sheet only far enough to be sure, and there in Lydia's round hopeful schoolroom hand were the words, "My dear Mr. Avery, the hawthorn is out along the Cheltenham Road, and I thought of how you said," and she folded it shut before she could read the rest, because some foolishness is sacred, and crossed back, and put the whole of it into her sister's hands. "Burn it tonight," she said softly, "every page. And then, dearest, write him a letter that is not foolish at all, and tell him a curate may keep a Yorkshire living, and a brave wife both, and let me see what the Duke of Ravensmere's good word can do for a young man's prospects. I find I have one to spend." Lydia made a sound that was half a sob and wholly a laugh, and pressed the packet to her chest, and could not speak at all, and the violins, at some unseen signal from the marshal in wine-dark silk, struck up the supper dance, as though no barn had been spared, and no king toppled, and the great heedless golden machine of the evening rolled on over the place where 3 lives had turned. "Come away," Edmund said, low, at her shoulder. "You have given them enough to write about for a 12-month. My aunt will hold the floor. She has been waiting 40 years for an evening exactly this size." His hand found the small of her back, warm through the silk, steady as a beam. "There is a thing I have no right to ask you, and I find I am going to ask it anyway, in the one place in this house where the walls do not pass it on." He drew her out through the roses, and the cool gallery took them, beeswax and old paper, and the green breath of the gardens, the sconces burning low, the fallen petals still pale on the dark parquet, where they had let them lie. The noise of the ball closed behind them. Only the fountain went on, out in the summer dark, running and running over its stone lip with its sound like applause that never ended, and beyond the open windows the lamps still lay their long gold bars across the gravel, exactly as the candlelight had lain across the gravel of the yew walk, an hour and an age ago. "You did it," she said. Her voice had begun, now that there was no one to see, to shake in earnest. "You stood up in front of every soul who matters, and you told them the truth, the worst of it, the inn, the false name. You handed them the very stick he meant to beat us with, and you broke it across your knee before he could swing." She turned to face him, and found the hard-weathered face nearer than she had thought, the old scar pale through the dark brow in the sconce light. It might not have answered. They might have turned on me instead of him. "You staked your name, your house, your mother's name, on a woman you have known for the length of a single dance. Why? And do not give me the wall again, Edmund. I am too tired and too frightened, and I want the truth one time without it dressed as something dry. He was quiet a moment. The fountain applauded. A petal let go of nothing and turned over once in the air. Because somewhere off the coast of Portugal, he said, 4 years ago, I decided there was nothing in England I could bear to come home and look at. My father's empty chair. My mother's name on a stone. A great house full of people who would want things of me the moment I walked in, and not one of them the thing itself. His grey eyes did not leave her face. And tonight I walked up through the dark, dreading every window of it, and a woman caught my sleeve, who wanted nothing of my name because she did not know it, and nothing of my fortune because she could not see it, and asked me only to stand. And I have not, Cassandra, in the whole of my granite life, ever once been simply stood upon by someone who needed the standing, and not the title under it. His hand came up, and his thumb passed once across her cheekbone, rough and warm, a hand that had held a rein, and an oar, and a spade. I told the truth in there, because I have spent 4 years not being able to look at anything in England, and I find that I can look at you, and I do not wish to stop, and I will not build the one true thing I have found on a foundation of the very lie that brought it. That is my reason. It is a poor one. I would not change it for the crown. Edmund. Marry me, he said. Not to spite Carmody, that is done. He is in his carriage. Not to please my aunt, though she will be insufferable about it for years. Marry me, because I asked you to be a man instead of a name, and you taught me, in 1 hour, that I had been only a name so long I had forgotten there was a man inside it to be asked for. Marry me on your terms, whatever they are, and name them now, and I will hold to them though the heavens fall. The corner of his mouth moved, that dry banked thing she had learnt the whole shape of in a single night. And if you will not, if you have had quite enough of dukes you find in shrubbery, then say so, and I will give you my name's protection, regardless, and ask nothing, and call myself fortunate to have been your wall for 1 evening. The choice is entirely yours. I have, you will note, made it very simple. I so dislike a complicated bargain. The laugh broke out of her, appalled, helpless, wet with tears. Entirely the wrong sound, and she pressed her gloved knuckles to her lips, exactly as she had at the foot of the terrace steps a lifetime ago, and shook her head at him, and could not stop. You quoted him, she managed. You villain. You stole his own dreadful line. I thought it wanted a better owner. He waited, and under the dryness she saw that he was not breathing quite evenly, that the wall was, beneath everything, a man standing in a cold gallery waiting on a word, and the sight of it undid the last knot in her chest. My terms, Cassandra said, are these. She took a breath, and steadied it, and met the grey eyes square. Lydia comes to live with us until she is settled, and her Mr. Avery is to have your good word, and no one in this house is ever again to be bargained over behind her own back. For I have heard you say you do not permit it, and I mean to hold you to it. I will not be a duchess who is decorative. I have managed accounts since I was 14, and I will manage yours. And you will be glad of it. And you will go on letting me make you laugh in rooms where duchesses do not, because I find I cannot do without the sound of it. Her chin came up, trembling and high. And in return I will love you, Edmund, plainly, and without an inventory, which is the only way I have ever known how I, who came into your garden to borrow a stranger, and find I have given him the whole of myself instead, and cannot, now, conceive of wanting it back. Those are my terms. They are poor ones. I would not change them for the crown. For a moment the Duke of Ravensmere only looked at her, with his mother's name still warm in the air between them and the fountain running on outside in the dark. Then he drew her in. Slow. Careful. The way a man gentles a thing that has been frightened a long while, and he set his mouth to hers, and it was not a pretend husband's kiss, and it was not cold, and it was not bored, and it tasted of cedar and salt, and the green summer night, and, faintly, of the loosening roses they had walked through to reach it. And somewhere far behind them in the bright loud heart of the house 200 people turned and turned beneath the chandeliers, none of them knowing that the only thing in Ravensmere worth the watching had slipped out through the roses to become, quietly, in a cold gallery, entirely true. They were married in September, when the first frost had silvered the water meadows, and the harvest was in, and the river ran low and gold between its willows, at the little grey chapel at Aldernsh, on the northern land, by Edmund's own chaplain, with no one present but the Dowager Duchess, and Lydia in dove grey gone happy at last, and old Mortimer weeping frankly into a square of Ravensmere linen, and not troubling, for once, to repeat anyone exactly. Cassandra wore her mother's pearls, redeemed at last from the Cheltenham pawnbroker, with the first money that had ever in her life been simply, easily hers, and the chapel smelled of cold stone and beeswax, and the chrysanthemums Lydia had carried up from the kitchen garden, their bitter green scent sharp in the autumn air, and the Duke of Ravensmere said, "I will," in his low gravel voice, as though he had never in his granite life said anything so easy. Sir Felix Carmody troubled them no further. He had gone back across his 2 counties to find that a man who strikes his match in a crowded ballroom and spares no barn is left holding only the burnt stick, that drawing rooms which had once received him now found themselves engaged, that the Dowager Duchess of Ravensmere had, in her dry, merciless way, simply mentioned a thing or two, here and there, over the autumn teacups, until the county arranged itself. The river stayed entailed, as it had been 40 years, and would be 40 more. And the water meadows came up green again in the spring, as water meadows do, indifferent to every quarrel of the men who think they own them. She found him there one morning the following June, a year almost to the night from the yew-walk, out before the household stirred, as he had ridden alone all the years she had not known him. Save that now he was not alone, for he had waited for her at the field gate with 2 horses, and that banked warmth at the back of his eyes that no longer troubled to bank itself. The hawthorn was out white along the hedgerows, the grass was wet to the fetlock, and the air smelled of crushed green and cut hay drying somewhere over the hill, and the larks were going up and up into a sky the soft blue of a thing newly washed. "You are smiling," she said, riding up beside him, like a man with a secret. "I have learned to distrust that smile. The last time you smiled like that you stopped an orchestra. I was thinking," said the Duke of Ravensmere, "that a year ago tonight a woman seized my sleeve in the dark and informed me I was a duke, and was so very sure of it, and so very wrong about everything else, that I have been unable, since, to find England the least bit dull." He reached across the gap between the horses, and took her gloved hand, and turned it over, and pressed his mouth to the knuckles. Once, hard, a thing no pretend husband had any business doing, and every right in the world. Cold and bored, Duchess. I believe I have managed neither, all year. You did warn me you would be no good at it. I told you, Cassandra said, and her throat was full, and the larks sang on, that the pretending always comes true in the end, given enough of it. The fountain was too far to hear from the field gate, but she heard it anyway, the way one hears a thing that has run under everything for a year, running and running over its stone lip with its sound like applause that never ends. And she turned her hand in his and held it, plainly, without an inventory. And they sat their horses in the wet June grass, with the whole green indifferent morning, turning gold around them, the borrowed stranger, and the woman who had never given him back, and neither of them, this time, said a word, because there was no longer anyone left to convince. If this story warmed a corner of your evening, if you have ever found the truest thing in your life in the very moment you had given up looking for it, stay a while here by the fire with us. Tell me, down in the comments, the line that stayed with you, and whether you knew the stranger in the yew-walk for a duke before Cassandra did. Subscribe, and keep your candle lit, and I will see you again by the fireside, where there is always another story waiting in the dark, and always a chair kept warm for you. Until then, good night, and sweet dreaming.